Today's lesson is all about educational objectives. More specifically, it's about how to create clear, specific, and measurable educational objectives for a single lesson using Bloom's taxonomy as a guide. Educational objectives are statements that describe what a student should know, understand, or be able to do by the end of an assignment, lesson, or course. In our textbook, Nutrition Education, Linking Research, Theory, and Practice, the author describes two types of objectives: general and specific. General educational objectives provide overall guidance for the development of activities for a given session or series of sessions on the same set of behaviors. You'll develop general educational objectives in step 4 of the design process. Specific educational objectives, on the other hand, guide the development of each of the activities within a given session. Specific objectives will be developed in step 5 of the design process. Now, it's important to note that since you are developing objectives for only one lesson, your general and specific objectives might be quite similar. Crafting educational objectives takes practice. There are 2 errors I most commonly see when students first get started and one easy fix. Let's start by reviewing the 2 most common errors so you know what to avoid. The first error is that objective statements contain a verb that is too broad or vague. For example, by the end of the lesson, students will understand common theories of behavior change. Here, the verb in question is understand. While this may be an important concept, my question for you is this: how exactly would you know if the student was successful? How might they demonstrate understanding? The problem with the verb understand is that it's not specific or easily measured. The learner has no idea how understanding will be measured, so it's hard to know if they're on track. The second error is that objective statements are too complex. For example, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to effectively communicate the benefits of a plant-based diet and will establish a plan for eating more fruits and vegetables on a daily basis. Now, there are 2 problems with this statement. The first is the phrase, effectively communicate. Anytime you use an adverb to describe or qualify the action verb, you add a layer of complexity to how the action will be measured. In this case, how will you define or measure effective? The second problem with this statement is that it contains 2 sets of action verbs: communicate the benefits of a plant-based diet and establish a plan of action. What happens if the student is able to communicate the benefits but is unable to establish a plan for action? Would you deem this a success? The easiest solution for an objective like this is to create 2 separate statements: one that addresses a student's ability to communicate, and a second to measure their action planning capabilities. Now, you may recall that I mentioned that there's one simple way to avoid these common errors when writing your own educational objectives. This is where Bloom's taxonomy comes in. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchy of cognitive skills that, when used, helps facilitate learning. In this image, the lower order thinking skills are found at the bottom and often serve as a foundation for learning new concepts or skills. In this version, lower order thinking skills are on the left side of the continuum, while higher order thinking skills are seen on the right. In higher education, for example, there's a strong focus on cultivating higher order thinking skills, like analysis, evaluation, and creation. As a graduate student, you've had more practice thinking critically about the concepts you're studying when compared to an undergraduate. Some Bloom's taxonomy resources will have a list of action verbs for each level of thinking that can be used to help you craft specific and measurable educational objectives. In order to create meaningful objectives using Bloom's taxonomy, however, there are 2 things you need to know. The first is your audience. Getting to know your audience will help you determine where they may be on this continuum and where you'd like them to be by the end of your lesson. And the second are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you hope your students will acquire as a result of your lesson. With these 2 things in mind, you may already be thinking about the activities or instructional strategies that you'd like to integrate into your lesson. But before you go any further, it's time to write clear, specific, and measurable educational objectives. What actions will help students get to the level of thinking that you have planned for your lesson? Start by consulting a comprehensive list of action verbs. This one is divided by level of thinking, with remembering to the left and creating to the right. Take note of the verbs and level of thinking that seem to align with your broader lesson objectives. As a note, there are countless resources available online to help you find the perfect action verb for the objectives you have in mind. You can find links to a few of my favorites in the resources section of the course for this week. Finally, to create your objective statement, follow this basic structure. By the end of the lesson, participants will be able to insert your action verb from Bloom's taxonomy, and then add the specific concept, skill, or ability that they should master. Do you recall the example I used at the beginning? Understand common theories of behavior change used in the development of health promotion programs. Let's put all that we've discussed into practice. Here's the revised version. By the end of the lesson, participants will be able to describe how the health belief model and social cognitive theory can be used to explain why a person may or may not engage in healthful behaviors, such as regular physical activity. Notice how substituting the word describe for understand provides a hint as to how you might measure success. And by using a more specific action verb, it also forces you to get clear about the object in your statement. In this case, we changed common theories of behavior change to the specific theories, the health belief model and social cognitive theory, and to what degree they would need to be able to explain these principles, in this case, how the theories are used to explain health behavior. This simple change provides added clarity for the student as well as the instructor. In summary, designing a meaningful learning experience for students starts with clear educational objectives. The key to writing clear educational objectives is choosing a concrete action verb that is both specific and measurable and aligns with the level of thinking that is most appropriate for your audience. Once you have clear objectives, it will be so much easier to identify the best activities to make up your final lesson.